Ah, Welcome. Good morning, everyone. Today is Monday, August 26, 2024. We are gathered for a work session. Our topic for today is to have a conversation about a quarterly update regarding our Climate Smart, Future Ready plan and efforts. My name is John Kafalis, Commissioner from District 1, joined by my Commissioner colleagues, Kristen Stevens from District 2, and Jody Shattuck McNally from District 3. Of course, we are accompanied by our County Manager, Lauren DeVolker, and off to the side we have our Assistant County Manager, Lori Kadrich. Before I turn it over to our main presenters, Lorenda, is there anything you'd like to say to perhaps cue things up?
Sure. I will just start by saying that Heidi convenes an executive committee ahead of these meetings, and so that group of community members has had a chance to look at these and provide some feedback to this as well. So this is really a collaborative effort. Heidi is like the conductor in an orchestra. There are lots of moving parts, lots of things happening out in the community. And so I'll let her talk about what she wants to focus on this quarterly report, and then kind of foreshadow what next quarterly report might include.
Thank you, Lorenda. If indeed Heidi is the conductor of this orchestra, anxious to know what section of the orchestra Abby is part of, whether it's brass or strings, or maybe she'll let us know later. Welcome, colleagues. Thank you, Lorenda.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity. Heidi Pruess, Office of Sustainability and Climate. Very happy to be here with you today to provide you with an update. The last update that I provided to you for Climate Smart Future Ready, I tried to cover the entire ball of wax that is Climate Smart Future Ready plan. And it might have been a little bit too much and didn't allow for us to get down into the detail of some of the effort. So what I am doing differently with this quarterly report has broken down a portion of Climate Smart Future Ready that we'll focus on today related to the actions that impact our greenhouse gas emission report. Then in the next quarter, we'll come back and address those other actions that maybe are secondarily impacting that emission inventory. As you may recall, if I can change the screen here. There we go. There are 3 different focus areas for Climate Smart Future Ready, all connected by the 4th overarching focus area of interconnected strategies that you can see there in the middle of this diagram. So again, today I'm going to focus on the 2 areas that impact our greenhouse gas emissions, the yellow circle being the built environment, circular economy, business and jobs. This is really our building energy use, our waste management, and overall workforce development that is engaged with our built environment. And that blue circle, which is mobility of people, goods, and services. How is it that we get around? How is it that our things get around in our community? So those are the 2 places that I'm going to focus today. Of course, we do have the natural environment, water, agriculture. This focus area does encompass disaster recovery preparedness, but that is one that we'll focus on in the next quarterly update. Just as a refresher for you, we did finalize this plan just in March. So it's only been about 6 months or so that we have been working on the action within our action teams, actually implementing the plan. Of the 19 action teams that we have, their main focus this first couple of months has been to prioritize. I don't know if you recall, but we have 125 stepwise tactics to implement our plan over the next 5 years. So this first 6 months has been for them to prioritize those. What is it we're just focusing in on for year 1 and year 2 so that we can understand where our priorities lie. And that exercise has led our 19 action teams to identify 28 of those 125 tactics to begin with. Again, as a refresher, we did adopt a greenhouse gas emission reduction goal for this plan and for Larimer County overall. This is a 2030 goal, despite the fact that the plan is a 2050 plan. So we are going to be reevaluating the implementation of the plan, our progress towards meeting the 2030 goal as we move towards 2050. But that 2030 goal does include a 45% greenhouse gas emission reduction, and how are we going to get there would be the question. The 3 bullets below that title identify for you that the very last bullet there with utility provider being 35%, this is the transition of our utilities away from fossil fuel energy sources towards renewables. So provided that they attain their goals by 2030, this will help us meet 35% of that overall 45% goal. The other 2 areas that would help us achieve our goal are within the energy potential and the transportation potential focus areas. 3.2% was modeled if we had medium, kind of moderate, medium, average adoption of the plans and the actions that are coming forward in the plan, and I'll talk a little bit about what those are. So we're striving for full adoption, of course, of these actions in order for us to meet our goals. So this is kind of a graphic view of what these action teams are working on. The 3 items that are in the boxes that are yellow are actions from our energy, our built environment action team that directly impact our greenhouse gas emissions. So starting on the bottom left, you'll see the commercial building gap assessment team. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about codes and advancing renewable energy. So all 3 of those contribute to greenhouse gas emission reductions. Then the blue boxes are all of the mobility topic areas. So I'll have a slide for each one of those. What is it that we're doing in our mobility realm? And you'll see there in the center is an environmental justice green circle connecting everything together. And I'll have a couple of slides at the very end to highlight what's going on there. So first with the energy action teams and these energy actions, you might wonder what's going on there. We do have an energy efficiency and electrification team. This first year they have been, or for 6 months, not even a year, they have been developing a technical assistance program for our commercial building sector. These are our large buildings, 20,000 feet maybe and above, although the team is still working on exactly what the breadth and the scope of this program will be as they develop the program. We've had some wonderful pro bono work being done by some consultants in order to help us develop this technical assistance program and what it will look like. And you can see the list of partners that are on the right-hand column of this table, which will carry through for all the other action teams. So you can see who's engaged in this discussion. The hope is that this technical assistance program will be ready to take the next step as to how do we implement it after it has been fully fleshed out. So that's what's going on there. For our energy code team, this is when we talk about regional efforts, this truly is a multi-county regional endeavor. As you'll see on the right-hand column there, we have Boulder County and Weld County engaged with us in this discussion to collaborate on code updates for this next cycle. Right now, our energy codes are being updated at the state level, and so as we wait for adoption there and understand a little bit more what our unifying discussion is going to be around code adoption for energy, this team will be working on that, and they've been collaboratively meeting about how do they meet. So this is a great first step for us to have this really, truly regional discussion. The final energy action item is the grid resilience and renewables team. This team, you'll see on the right-hand column, is largely comprised of our utility providers who are right now trying to identify where the gaps are in existing programs for renewable programs for the community and that grid resilience piece overall within their systems. So this team hasn't identified the specific action they're going to hone in on because they are concentrating on where are the gaps within the existing programs that are present. So just as a summary slide for the energy action items, these 3 energy action items are what are being worked on right now by our action teams. They're having really great discussions. Questions on energy before I go to mobility?
Thank you, Heidi. Colleagues, this would be a great opportunity to ask questions or offer comments. Commissioner Stevens?
Yeah, so with those large commercial buildings, have we had initial conversations with folks? Do we feel like there's receptivity to, kind of working on some of this? I mean, obviously, it's sort of a carrot and not a stick kind of program, and so I think that helps with people, being open to it. Plus, there could be cost savings for these building owners. So can you tell me what that looks like at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, the state has a requirement for benchmarking for large commercial buildings at 50,000 square feet and larger are required to go through a benchmarking program and to have a plan for updating their energy efficiency and their electrification. So what we're working on developing is a little bit of that intermediate stage of large buildings, yes, but not those that maybe are already required and should have a plan going on. To that end, we have invited the Chamber of Commerce to come assist us within this working group to identify of these 600 large commercial buildings that you see on the bullet item here. These are the ones within our assessor's office that have been identified in that 20,000 square foot and above list of buildings, and there's a variety of different types of activities that are happening within these buildings. So the pro bono work that's been done by our consultant partner Schneider Energy is trying to identify within the program what are the different pieces that would address different businesses. A warehouse is much different than a brewery, for instance, that sort of thing. So they're working on that piece of it first before we go out to these businesses to identify, does this meet your needs? Is there something else we need to add? What else can we help you with in that arena? So that process is ongoing.
Just like the follow-up,
course, yeah.
is there any intent for the state to go below that 50,000 square foot threshold? Will they, in other words, will they be kind of trying to get at those intermediate size
I believe
buildings?
eventually they will be.
Okay.
And that belief comes from the fact that Fort Collins right now is addressing or exploring going down to 5,000 square feet, which is a big gap, as well as the city of Denver also has a lower range than the 50,000 square foot range. So because our larger cities are going in that direction, I would fully expect that eventually the state's program would go lower, address buildings of a smaller footprint.
So this may be good for them to get started on this work if they're going to have to do it anyway.
Exactly. We are trying to gain some benefits before the time comes that we can maybe assist our community with.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Shattuck McNally, do you have any questions or comments?
No, Commissioner Stevens asked my question. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions, follow up on some of what I heard in the exchange with Commissioner Stevens. Well, one thing you mentioned is that you're interacting with the Fort Collins Chamber of Commerce, which is a good thing. There are a variety of chambers of commerce. Could you speak to that? Are you engaging all of the relevant chambers of commerce?
The invitation is always open for others to join us. The invitation has gone out. The Fort Collins Chamber is the one that has been participating to date.
And I would respectfully submit that, recognizing there are always resource and capacity issues, sometimes we don't always respond to invitations, and I'm not sure how often you've offered those invitations or
Thank you.
what's been the medium to do that, whether it's email or phone call. But I would think there's logic in following up with, some of the key, like the Loveland Chamber and Wellington. I mean, there are others, all the different municipalities and even unincorporated. That maybe that's a bit of a lesser priority, but up at Red Feather Lakes, technically they have an area chamber of commerce.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Of
I will
course.
continue to reach out.
If I may, just two questions, I think. So the focus is on private sector, commercial buildings. Please remind us again, what are we doing on the public sector, large square footage buildings to encourage, incentivize, energy efficiency and codes and all of that?
Yeah, thank you for raising that. I did kind of skip over. How did we get to large commercial buildings in the first place? The energy efficiency electrification team took a look at what are all the programs that are existing right now, and not wanting to overlap services, not wanting to recreate work that's already being covered. And so, for instance, Efficiency Works is a program that is offered through both Fort Collins and Loveland as part of the Platte River Power program for residents specifically that identifies not only we can do an audit for you, we can provide some of that information, but also here are the rebates and here are the programs to incentivize you following through with those recommended changes. So the residential sector does have a more robust outreach and available rebate incentive program than the commercial sector has.
And and that's great, and I'm specifically referencing large buildings, government buildings like ours.
Oh, right, thank you. So this was part of the gap. This is why this program is happening, is that there really hasn't been much of a concerted effort for outreach to large commercial buildings or medium-sized commercial buildings, depending on what your definition. That 5,000 square foot to 20,000 square foot range for our commercial buildings, often it's assumed you have an energy manager if you have a very large building or something of the sort that's helping you manage the energy in these facilities, and in fact, that may not be the case. And so this program is hoped to fill that gap.
And again, I understand that from various energy assessments that we've done with the Larimer County buildings. I mean, overall, we've identified where there are some gaps and where there might be some relevant greenhouse gas emissions. But overall, our buildings are pretty energy efficient. And that's what I'm trying to get at is public sector buildings like ours, like, the city of Fort Collins, like the city of Loveland. Are we also engaging them to make sure that their buildings are as energy efficient as possible?
Yes.
Okay.
They are included in that 600-plus number for
okay.
large commercial buildings. The public sector buildings are included in that
Well,
number.
that answers that
I'm
question.
sorry that I didn't understand your question.
No,
It took us a minute to get around there.
All sorts of additional information along the way. And then I suppose my final question is regarding energy codes, and the state can you help clarify our efforts at the local level to update our energy codes? And I know there's international energy codes and all. How is that all supposed to work together? When the state passes legislation, depending on how that legislation is, we typically have to adhere to their requirements. And I think that's where the 20,000 square foot thing comes in. Mm-hmm. Could you speak to that? Our efforts with regionally, how they will align with whatever the state may do to update, and how the international, whatever it's called, energy building and energy codes standards, because aren't they updated every couple of years or something?
They are updated every couple of years. Thank you for the question. I wish Eric Fried was here. He's our code official here at Larimer County, and he has a lot more detail than I do. But what I will share with you is that, yes, the International ECC, Energy Code Council,
Okay.
that might be right, actually adopts on a national level. That's what the process that's ongoing right now. The state energy office then evaluates that, and as they adopt what will be there, typically counties and cities can just do exactly what you're saying, is adopt what has been adopted on the state level or on the national level. But many of our sister counties and ourselves have made amendments to that according to what it is that will better address our community. So there is that stepwise process, and that's why that team is waiting for what is happening at the national level.
That's very helpful, and you're reminding me too, Heidi, that when sometimes the state will pass legislation in this arena, and there'll be some potential opt-out provisions for more rural counties where, the situation is different.
That's right.
So
That's
thank you for answering my questions. Unless there are others, I believe we can move on to the next focus area
Okay.
or the next
Excellent.
transportation, yes.
Thank you. So transportation, there are 3 action teams that are working on mobility topics within Climate Smart Future Ready. The first one, this mobility team, is looking at regional transportation. Where is it that we are connecting in and addressing, again, any potential gaps that might be identified? This group is hosted by the North Front Range MPO, and as such, they are looking at what is happening in that MPO, North Front Range MPO region, which does not include all of Larimer County. The Upper Front Range MPO also has some jurisdiction within Larimer County. And so this group is looking at those variety of different plans, and where is it that the urban-urban or urban-rural connections between these plans are maybe being lost in the shuffle. Maybe there's some opportunity for us to communicate better on our plans on these cross-boundary issues. So that's what this first team is looking at, and as you know, our transportation master plan is underway right now to have an update, and that is part of the discussion of this group. I will pause and just take a moment to, I forgot on the energy slides again, the strategic plan alignment that we have within our county strategic plan is highlighted at the bottom of each of the tables for these action teams. And you will see that each one of these action teams is not only aligned with Climate Smart Future Ready, but also with our strategic plan. So I'll move on to the next action team, which is our alternative modes of transportation team. They're focusing on bike, pedestrian, non-motorized transportation, and this team is trying to understand the variety of pieces of metrics, data that's available for us to better understand if we reduce vehicle miles traveled, are we seeing an increase in use on our trails? The metrics and the ability to track the information about where is a reduced vehicle miles traveled going, what's happening to a reduction there, is something that is a little bit unknown. And so this group is trying to use this team as a connection within that discussion. Again, as you can see, we have a couple of partners from Weld County that are also part of this group by virtue of the existing team that the North Front Range MPO had to address these issues. The final mobility action team is our e-mobility or electronic mobility action team, looking at electric vehicles and electric transportation. We're supporting, and actions in this action team are supporting our existing electric vehicle infrastructure plan that we have within Larimer County that's kind of connecting the electric vehicle charging station plans for Fort Collins, for Estes Park, and the like. This team has also been very active in developing, through our partnership that we started before this action team was developed, with Partners in Energy, the Excel Partners in Energy program, that's assisting us with developing out this infrastructure plan. They're also assisting us with the communication plan and outreach plan. Those things are actively underway, almost completed, and we're almost ready to go out into our community and provide to them a little bit of outreach with regard to, if you're a private business, this is kind of the step 1, step 2, step 3 guide for how you can install electric vehicle charging stations, as well as this is how to utilize them if you're a member of the public. So these are our 3 action teams addressing the transportation component. Questions on transportation?
Well done, Heidi. Thank you. Colleagues, questions, comments, observations? Commissioner Stevens?
Yeah, so I guess with the, I'm thinking about the mobility team, with the 34 corridor having the new TMO, you may be engaging with them through the MPO, but I think that that's definitely a regional, thing, a regional situation that we're looking at, so includes Weld County and all the way potentially up to Estes Park, around found some alternative transportation on that corridor, which has none. So it may be, I know that TMO doesn't have an executive director yet, but as soon as they do, that might be a good group to kind of loop in.
Yeah. Thank you
It's
for that
just
reminder.
forming. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, otherwise, yeah, I think that tagging on to some of the work that's already been doing, that's already happening at the MPO level is pretty important, and we don't have to recreate the wheel. And obviously, there's greenhouse gas emission reductions that have been identified by the state and that the MPO has to abide by as we turn in planning for, our multi-year plans for transportation. So, I think this is good work to, like I said, tag on to that, and I appreciate what you're doing. The electric vehicle charging stations feel like, I'm excited about that work, and it feels like there's some, are there problems with that? I mean, it's maybe more expensive than we thought it was going to be. We still have problems with charging stations not being, not working as well or not being as frequent as we'd like them. So can you give some update on kind of where you think that is at this point?
Yeah, and just as a sneak preview, there will be a slide at the very end that will talk about a grant that we're pursuing that's on your admin matters consent agenda for tomorrow. The electric vehicle charging network statewide is not as robust as it needs to be in order for us to have a more secure system overall. There are always going to be, as we know with our phones, there are often times when it just doesn't work. We have to turn it all the way off, turn it back on in order for it to work and have continuity. That same idea is what will be better addressed by having more charging stations throughout our region and certainly throughout the state. I do believe that the system has gotten much better. I know that now if you own an electric vehicle and you're searching for stations, if there's one that's out of service, it tells you now rather than you going there and discovering, oh no, now this station is out of service. So the communication back and forth between the infrastructure itself and the users has gotten much, much better. And I say that as an electric vehicle owner myself. So I think that it will continue to improve, and there are still sufficient number of gaps in the system that there still is a little of that anxiety around range. How far is it that I can go with my particular electric vehicle? So while the system itself continues to improve, the vehicles are coming out now with more and more and more range. The charging stations are also, that system is getting better and better.
And are the costs higher than they were anticipated for putting them in some cases?
Yeah,
I think we're finding that in our building
for certain,
envelopes.
The installation is kind of like in your own home. If you don't put a garage on your house and then you want to retrofit and put a garage on your house, it's very expensive to go back and make that connection between the house and the garage. It's the same thing with our EV charging station infrastructure. So where we have these existing facilities, for which rightly so at the time, we put our transformers and our electric systems to fit what we thought the need of the building was going to be and not overcompensate for something. Now we're adding more electric demand within those existing facilities, which requires us to upgrade transformers. It requires us to lay new cable, which means we might need to replace a sidewalk. So those things are more expensive than if you were to install those for new build, new construction.
Thank you. That's why it's important to reform the code. And that's
Yes.
why we looked at, some of that when we were doing the code, even a few years ago, is requiring some of that in commercial buildings that had more than 10 parking spots or whatever our threshold was, because we knew that retrofitting was expensive and hard to enforce after the fact, so.
Most certainly, most certainly.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Shaddock McNally, any questions or comments?
Yes, I do. First, Abby and Heidi, thank you for all this great work, and I appreciate a chance to kind of do this a little differently, so appreciate that. when I think about some of these, some of this work and the work that you mentioned in the previous topic, that I didn't make too many questions because my biggest question had been asked. But when I think about transportation and we talk about just commuting, and we know how many people are commuting between towns, but also we have every summer 4.3 million people driving in, and then we have people going up to Horsetooth. And I really appreciate seeing the town of Estes and some of these other folks on there. What kind of things are we doing to help think about how we can mitigate the tourism emissions that are coming? I know there's a hiker shuttle, and we've got the EV stations in Estes, but I'm wondering even if we try to expand or look at how we coordinate more than that. Just curious about those talks, or if that's been a discussion about. That's a lot of cars that come into Larimer County every year.
It sure is. And one of the biggest challenges with regard to Estes Park and the number of visitors is that the National Park Service has no interest in installing the infrastructure for electric vehicles going forward. Just like if you go to the park today with a traditional gasoline fuel vehicle, you can't fuel on the national park either. So the infrastructure piece there is a heavy burden on the town of Estes Park and the other municipalities that lead into that destination location. So there have been some attempts at outreach. How is it that we can coordinate better the transportation that's happening in the park versus the number of visitors that are coming through the town of Estes Park and other locations? And that's why we've identified some of these both corridor locations for charging stations as well as destination or community charging locations. Our plan attempts to coordinate with the plans of the municipalities to look at traffic flow, safety concerns that go in and out of areas that all these visitors are coming through, whether it's a medical facility or a school or a shopping center and the like. And so we are working towards understanding that better.
Thank you for that. And I know you said and I appreciate the collaboration and partnership building with the Weld County and Boulder County, our neighbors. So when I think about that, I think about Tahosa Valley, and there's a lot of camping grounds, a lot of people who travel back and forth, and it's a long stretch without any, services. I know that very well. But there is a sort yard Boulder County has midway that's actually in our county, but it serves over there. And so there's infrastructure maybe there, and I'm just curious in partnership to maybe look at what that looks like in the middle, and we haven't looked at that because just kind of curious about that as well. So I just think for those who are dropping off or maybe camping that all of a sudden find themselves, strapped. I know a lot of campers are bringing their own solar panels, but that doesn't charge up their cars. So just curious about that. So
Yeah, not yet. The technology is trying to catch up with what we do every day, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you for that suggestion of that location. I don't believe that's one that was identified. The funding is a tricky part because there are restrictions on the locations for where charging stations are the most needed versus where a couple of folks might want them. So looking at the demand and looking at what energy is actually supplied at that particular location may help us determine the charging infrastructure in the future.
Well, I know there's just a lot of camps there, like very popular long-term camps where lots of people go. There's also the other entrance, Basin entrance for Rocky over there. People are traveling between Boulder and County that way. There's a lot of folks who live there, up there, and that are hidden back in the trees. And so just kind of thinking about that, just maybe back of your head, because I just think that there's, with the other interests and a lot of people going that way, and also Long's Peak is a heavy utilized area for people camping, climbing, hiking, camping, all the things. So just kind of, and Lily Lake is also very, 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 very popular. So I just curious about that. Just wanted to kind of flag that. And then when we're talking about, there's some projects at downtown Loveland and some other groups that are growing really fast. And then I don't see Town of Berthoud really growing fast. And you're right, it's cheaper to put the infrastructure in. But some of these communities that are growing, expanding, I'm like thinking of Town of Wellington, Timnath, I mean, all of these folks, how do we reach out and try to get ahead of it? Because it is expensive retroactively, we all know that, but there's some big projects downtown Loveland where that is not, when I've asked those questions, it wasn't even on their process, their radar, nothing to even look at doing any, and those folks are going to be living there, and I'm just curious about that as well.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I agree. The coordination is probably the hardest part. So there's a tiered system. The state has a National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Plan that identifies along the main corridors where they believe charging stations and charging infrastructure should be installed. And so our plans are trying to coordinate with that NEVI plan so that while the state is concentrating on the main corridors, our plans are concentrating on those community centers and community-based charging infrastructure. So we are working very hard with our partners, not only in Larimer County, our municipalities, but also trying to understand where our connection is with our sister counties, that we might need to understand that charging infrastructure. So Abby, is there something else that you would add to that as far as the coordination for what's happening? I will share with you that Abby Stapleton is the primary lead, together with Drive Clean Colorado, on that e-mobility team and implementing the EV charging station plan. And this part of the outreach around the community engagement plan and the infrastructure plan is something that they've been working on.
Yeah, I would just say that I think we're trying to make the connections with those smaller towns with all of the work. Like when I was working on the Green Business Program, we're really working with Berthoud and Wellington to try to get some of those services there, since the bigger utility companies don't have anything for them. So that's one piece. And then the e-mobility, we have made contact, but it is harder because the bandwidth at those communities is harder, so they have to choose what is important to them at the time and what they can add more work to their plate. But I think that with our mapping that we're using for the e-mobility team, we're going to be looking at where those equity priority areas are, where the travel corridors are, and where businesses might be interested. There might be certain type of businesses that are more interested in charging stations versus other ones. So I think that our team is definitely going to try to push our infrastructure outreach to where people haven't been met with it yet, because Fort Collins might have had a lot more connection with the city on how to put a charger in and the cost, versus folks in Berthoud, those businesses might not have had any outreach yet. So I think we want to try to kind of sprinkle it around the county and make sure everyone's been reached.
And actually, Abby, to back up a bit, could you please identify yourself for the record, what you do around here?
Yes, sure. I'm Abby Stapleton. I'm a sustainability program coordinator working with Heidi.
Thank you. Anything else, Commissioner Shattuck McNally? I have, I believe, 3 comments. They're all happy comments. And a question. One comment is, well, for clarification purposes, earlier the acronym was North Front Range MPO, and many of us know that MPO stands for Metropolitan Planning Organization. And if you or Commissioner Stevens want to elaborate, but overall they are an instrumental organization, regional, that advances all things transportation, air quality, a variety of other things. But I just wanted to make sure that people knew that particular acronym. And again, if you folks want to elaborate, a very critical organization, and I'm glad they're a key stakeholder in these efforts. That's my first comment. My second comment is that looking at the various agencies and organizations that are involved in these efforts, seems like a pretty comprehensive list, and I appreciate that with the transportation or give me a moment. In particular, the mobility one, or the alternative transportation, bike, pedestrian, well, there's the one that includes the arc of Larimer County Foothills Gateway, so we are taking into consideration the needs of all of our residents with different mobility opportunities and challenges. And again, to your credit, a great list of participating organizations. And my third comment before I get to my question is I'm glad that we're looking at connectivity issues, and I look forward to the day when we can actually finalize the update of our transportation master plan and some of these efforts to address, to help people who live in places like Livermore or Red Feather Lakes or LaPorte to have more options besides driving into Fort Collins if that's where they're going to their jobs, to reduce vehicle miles traveled. So that'll be, it's not an easy one, none of this is, but that'll be a great achievement. So well done, absolutely. My question is, what is the timeline for installing the EV chargers at the 200 West Oak Administrative Services Building? When are we going to get that done?
Yes, thank you for the question.
Thank you.
The contract has been released, and the final designs are underway so that the construction can begin. I believe it's this fall. This fall, they should be implemented into this facility and the natural resources locations that we have.
So that suggests by the holidays we should have level 2 EV charging stations at 200 West Oak?
Level 3 fast charge.
Those are the fastest ones? And how many?
2 ports? Go ahead.
Yeah, there's just one fast charger here, but it'll have 2 ports. So depending on if there's 1 or 2 vehicles will depend on how many kilowatts that vehicle can get.
Great.
And for sure by the end of January, February, but I think it just depends on probably the ordering and how all the parts come in.
To be operational
Yeah,
and all that?
yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Unless there are other questions, let's continue, please.
Wonderful. So this is just that refresher slide. These 6 action teams that we've been discussing this morning are those that are having the most potential for impact on our greenhouse gas emission inventory. And together they are part of a larger research project and outreach project that we have for environmental justice. What do we mean by that? Well, environmental justice means that everyone has a right to clean and healthy environment, no matter their race, nationality, income, or where they live. And there is a program within the state of Colorado called the EnviroScreen program. This is a mapping tool that assembles the various data points that we have throughout the state with regard to income, race, and ethnicity, but it also includes items such as location in industrial sites or health impacts that might be realized from an environmental burden standpoint on disproportionately impacted parts of our community. And so we do have a research project that's happening with Dr. David Rojas from Colorado State University. He is one of the initial founders or team members for this EnviroScreen tool, which is in the process right now of being updated. And he's going to take that EnviroScreen tool together with the work of these 6 action teams that we just described and undergo an environmental justice outreach with the community, understanding what their needs and impacts are with regard to specifically those action items, and then how does that meet with both the outcomes in the EnviroScreen tool and how we might be able to impact the outcomes within that tool as they continue to update the data. The Larimer County Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Board, the EDI Advisory Board, is hearing and part of this topic as we move forward with understanding the questions, the members of the community that should be part of this outreach program. And you will see on this slide that the green rows are those points at which this EDI board, the Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Board, is weighing in on the progress of what is happening through this outreach endeavor and data analysis endeavor that Dr. Rojas is undertaking. So this is just in progress. You should just be aware that this is happening. We actually meet this week with that advisory board to continue this. And so this is something that you will have the full update on what happened with this endeavor in our next quarterly update.
Thank you. Thank you, Heidi. Commissioner Stevens?
Yeah, thank you for doing this work. This is really important, that we're not leaving people out when we have these conversations, so I appreciate your work on that. I just wanted to introduce another tool that CDOT's working on, and I don't know if you're familiar with that, and that's the TEAMS tool. It's Transportation Equity Assessment Map and Scorecard. It's a great tool for environmental justice with regard specifically to transportation. So it takes a look at things like proximity to a grocery store that offers fresh produce and things like that. So it's I think that they don't have the tool fully rolled out yet. It's not for public consumption yet, but they are doing some sort of beta testing on it. And I was trying to get something for one of our county commissioner groups, and they said that they would, kind of show them what that looks like. But I think that that's going to be a really great tool that sort of builds on the EnviroScreen tool, but specifically looks at the transportation, effects. And so, are you aware of that tool, and have you seen it?
Yes,
Okay.
I've seen that tool, and it's really exciting because it used to be that we needed to rely on the federal database tools and federal mapping tools to understand where our disproportionately impacted community members are. And those, because they're nationwide tools, are on a really high scale, and it's very difficult to drill down to a local level, a census tract kind of level. And so it's really exciting. There's actually probably a half a dozen to a dozen new tools that are coming out by the various different organizations, whether it's transportation or the energy sector even is creating some that are able to be more and more and more specific. So hopefully in short order, we will have better tools that help us say, this program impacted this community, that was successful, so let's repeat it, let's expand it, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what we're, when we say we want to be data-driven, like this is the kind of data, this is why we collect data, to be able to create tools like this that can really inform this work, and especially when it affects, vulnerable people in our communities and marginalized communities, to me, it becomes even more important. So thank you for just being aware of this and for making this a part of the climate work we're doing, because we know that climate issues affect poor and marginalized people more than it does people of middle class and upper middle class means. So thank you.
Yes,
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Shattuck McNally, anything?
Just, again, this is tremendous work, and I just want to thank you all for this. It is a heavy lift in a lot of ways, but I think what is so impressive to me is how far and how in depth you've gone with such tremendous partners. And because we can't do this alone, and it's authentic engagement, and the dashboard I was showing around to some national folks and some local folks, and they're just really impressed. And I just appreciate the updates, and just know, I know for the public, it probably sounds just almost overwhelming thinking about all these things, but I just really appreciate that you're able to piece it into pieces that we can digest and understand the progress. So I just want to thank you both. I commend you both for just a really fantastic work, and I appreciate it so much.
Yes, I think we all agree. Excellent work. I believe there are 2 more slides. I'd like to remind us that it'd be nice to have anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes before the next work session.
Yes,
so
sir.
Please keep that in mind as we get to the end.
Absolutely. We'll go very quickly on this slide because this is just an update with a whole bunch of numbers and a whole bunch of words on it. This is our list of how are we doing this work? How is it that we're able to have teams that can effectively work together and implement projects on the ground? And that is through securing funding, whether it be from state or federal resources. And so you can see here, this is a running update that I will keep for you. Eventually, it'll have to kick onto a second page. But you can see that we completed one grant, and that was because we completed the Climate Smart Future Ready planning effort. So that's been completed. There are a number of grants that are underway as they've been secured there, and you can see the list that is there. And then we have 2 that have been applied for recently, and I'm sure I have forgotten something on this list. But as I reached out to our champions, these are the ones that they provided to us as those that rose to the top. I hope that you can appreciate the level of diversity that this list comprises. And to that end, tomorrow on your admin matters consent agenda, you will have the application for one of those that's applied at the top of the last slide, which is the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant that is being offered federally by the Department of Transportation's Federal Highways Administration. This is a collaborative grant application. We are partnering with the City of Loveland, Thompson School District, and the Ranch to implement 16 new electric vehicle charging station locations. It has been quite an impressive effort that the City of Loveland has put in to identify where their match dollars could go for partners. Again, medical facilities, some of the schools, and the like. So this is an effort in which it's not only a county match, but these partners are bringing their match along with them. It is a 20% match obligation, and it helps us collaborate more with the state. In the state's application, the state of Colorado is applying for $50 million on the corridor of I-25 and coming up the Front Range. So while they're focusing on those corridors, we're focusing in on those community and destination location charging stations. So wanted to make you aware that this is going on. We look forward to the approval of this and trying to bring some of those match dollars to our county.
Thank you, Heidi. Yes, Commissioner.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you as well, and just really thank you for finding some of these grant opportunities, because we have a limited budget for doing this work, even though we're committed to doing it. And as we, look at having our budget maybe further whittled down by state and other forces, these kind of grant opportunities are going to become more and more important for us to get this work done. So I know it's not easy, and I know the applications themselves are complicated, and they often involve multiple partners. So I just really thank you for thinking outside the box and making things move forward, even with our limited dollars. So I appreciate the work. I know it's not easy, and but it's really important for our community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner, anything? Okay, thank you. I just want to quickly comment that this has been an interesting journey since 2019, and if we are to use a metaphor, perhaps planting the seeds in a garden. It seems to me in the last 5 years or so, a lot of it because of you folks and all of the partner agencies and people who do this work in the county above and beyond their normal job duties. I think our garden has blossomed quite a bit. There's some pretty good harvesting that's going on, so thank you for that work. Team effort. At this time, I believe it's 10:55. We will adjourn.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.